The flashing red and blue lights bounced off the windows of my house, and for a moment I wondered which of my neighbors had gotten themselves into trouble this time, but as I stepped outside in my uniform pants and t-shirt, sipping the last of my evening coffee, my jaw nearly dropped when I saw two patrol cars idling in front of my driveway, their spotlights aimed directly at my Jeep. The same old Jeep Wrangler I'd parked there every night for years, a rugged beast with mud still caked on the tires from last weekend's fishing trip, and standing right beside the officers was none other than Karen, the infamous HOA president, queen of petty complaints and ruler of ridiculous rules, her finger stabbing the air like a sword as she barked at the cops. "There it is. That junk vehicle is a violation of HOA standards, and it needs to be towed immediately." She didn't even glance at me as I walked up, too busy lecturing the officers about how my Jeep was unsightly and hurting property values, but the looks on their faces told me they weren't buying her story, especially once they realized whose driveway they were standing in, because what Karen didn't know, and what was about to shatter her illusion of power, was that I wasn't just a homeowner. I was the police chief of the entire city, and these were my officers, my department, and my rules of law, not hers. I let her rant for another 30 seconds, her voice rising shrill in the night air as neighbors peeked from their curtains, curious to see what drama their overzealous HOA leader had cooked up this time, and then I calmly stepped forward, folded my arms across my chest, and said in the firm, commanding tone that had quieted many a suspect, "Karen, why exactly are the police here for a vehicle parked in its owner's driveway?" She spun around, her face instantly paling when she saw me, but pride wouldn't let her back down. She puffed up like a rooster and snapped, "This Jeep is a violation of our HOA covenant, and I called law enforcement to have it removed, because rules are rules, and even you aren't above them," her voice trembling slightly, betraying the fact that she knew deep down she had crossed a line. The officers glanced at me, waiting for a signal, and I gave them a subtle nod to stand down while I handled it. I explained, calmly but firmly, that police do not enforce HOA rules, that this was private property, and that unless a law had been broken, there was absolutely no reason for them to be here. Then I turned to Karen and asked if she had even read the HOA covenant she waved around like a royal decree, because I had, cover to cover, and nowhere in its pages did it ban vehicles parked in driveways, especially not ones that were fully registered, insured, and in perfect working order, which my Jeep was. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, but before she could sputter out another excuse, I dropped the hammer. "Karen, do you realize you just made a false report to the police? You wasted department resources, you pulled 2 patrol units away from their actual duties tonight, and you attempted to use law enforcement as your personal HOA enforcers, which is not only improper but borders on criminal misuse of 911. The color drained completely from her face, and the crowd of neighbors who had now gathered at the edge of their lawns whispered among themselves, some even chuckling at her humiliation, because everyone had suffered under her petty reign at some point. Trash cans, visible from the street, holiday decorations, up too long, kids, too noisy, playing outside, but no one had dared stand up to her, until now. Karen stammered, trying to regain footing, saying, "I didn't know you were the police chief," as if that somehow excused her abuse of authority, and I cut her off cold. "It shouldn't matter who I am. The law applies the same to everyone, and what you did tonight crossed a line." I dismissed the officers, telling them to return to patrol, and as their cruisers rolled away, leaving just me, Karen, and the gawking neighbors, I leaned in close enough for her to hear but loud enough for the others to catch every word. "If you ever attempt to misuse police resources again for your personal vendettas, I will personally make sure you face charges for filing false reports and harassment. Do I make myself clear?" Her lips trembled, and for once, she had no snappy retort, just a meek nod before she scurried back to her house, slamming the door behind her, curtains snapping shut like prison bars. But that wasn't the end, because I don't believe in half measures when it comes to accountability. The next morning, I documented the entire incident, filed an internal report, and submitted a formal complaint to the HOA board with video evidence from my doorbell camera that had captured everything, and when the board met later that week, Karen's empire began to crumble. Homeowners who had long been silent finally spoke up, emboldened by what happened, recounting years of harassment and unreasonable fines, and with the majority vote, Karen was stripped of her presidency and removed from the board entirely, leaving her fuming but powerless. Her reign of terror officially ended. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood felt lighter, freer. Kids laughed in the streets without fear of citations, people parked their cars without worrying about fake violations, and every time I climbed into my Jeep and turned the ignition, the rumble of that engine wasn't just the sound of freedom, it was the sound of victory, a reminder that bullies, no matter how loud or self-important, always fold when confronted with truth and authority. As for Karen, she avoided me like the plague, never daring to make eye contact again, and while she may have thought she could bend the law to her will, she learned the hard way that some people don't just follow the law, they are the law, and when you cross them, your power trip ends faster than the slam of a gavel in a courtroom.